Hello and welcome to Northwest Indian News. I'm your host, Carissa Peaput-Gobin. Billy Frank Jr. embodied the spirit of a native warrior. He was a charismatic leader who spent his life defending treaty fishing rights. Dedicated to protecting salmon runs, Billy served as chairman of the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission for more than 30 years. His passing in May of 2014 left the community stunned and saddened. We would like to dedicate this episode of Northwest Indian News to honoring Billy's work and legacy.
Salmon have been at the core of our Northwest Indian culture since the beginning of time. A foundation we very nearly lost were it not for the inspiration of leaders like Billy Frank Jr. Billy Frank Jr. had a special quality. Among the Nisqually, it's called tamanois. There really is no English equivalent, but it refers to a quality of spirit that other people can feel. Billy had very strong tamanois.
Both my mom and my dad were both amazing teachers. He taught me to always tell our story, about the fishing wars, about our treaty rights, about our sovereignty, and it's getting, less and less told because of that older generation is moving on now. There's not a lot of people who were part of the fishing wars that are left, and so for me, I'm telling his story to whoever wants to listen.
The most important attribute of Billy was his ability to bring people together. He was able to bring tribes together. He was able to bring nations together. He had the ability to be down on the riverbank talking to fishermen one moment, and the next moment he would be in the White House talking to the president, and he never skipped a beat. He had that ability to do that. He was always asking hard questions. At the same time, he was giving them a hug.
I really enjoyed the humor of Billy, and we would go into meetings and he would make people laugh. He would make people come out of themselves and talk to him. And even when he was angry at people, his humor would show up sooner or later. And he could be so tired, but he would always find the energy to just keep traveling day after day, protecting the treaty rights, the sovereignty of what he believed in. He's home here at Nisqually, that river, his father and his mother and his children and grandchildren.
Billy Frank Jr. had a huge impact on my life. Confided in him, asked for advice. And again, his advice was always the same. Keep protecting the treaty, protect the salmon, protect your hunting, gathering, and fishing rights. You must protect that. And so you do that, and everything else will take care of itself. But you have to actively do that, because if you don't do that, others will take it away from you. We can't have that, because we need to protect the environment. We need to protect the salmon.
It's hard for fishermen and others to do the right thing for the salmon when it's not the right thing for their pocketbook. And Billy was a person who could do that and who could talk to those folks. Talk to those folks as an elder, as a wise elder, and talk to those folks as somebody who's dedicated his life to doing the right thing.
If you knew Billy and you interacted with him and he inspired you, he did what he wanted to do. And that was, he put his knowledge and his inspiration in you to do the same thing that he was doing.
What he did for everybody, not for himself. He talked for everybody, not course like, I'm Billy Frank, I'm in Nisqually, and I'm doing this. No, he don't do that. He said, we're going to be here rest of our life. We're going to be here just as long as everybody else, And he said, we got to keep going. That Billy back would be good, but no.
We fished every day. We continued to fish. We'd fought him every day. We'd fight him. We'd go to jail, get out of jail, come back, go to jail again, get out of jail, come back, fishing. We never gave up. We just continued the struggle going on and on.
Who says that all good things must come to an end? That nothing lasts forever? That you can't turn the tide for good? For us, protecting nature comes so naturally. We're the tribes in Western Washington, stewards, and have been for centuries to come.
We have our own way of thinking. We think sustainability is nothing new. We think justice is older than any government. We think we can grow radishes on the moon. We think the war against diabetes is fought on the basketball court. We think the same berries we pick today should be here for another 7 generations. We think education is for the mind and the spirit. We think Indian.
Help tribal college students preserve their way of thinking.
The 1855 Medicine Creek Treaty secured tribes the right of taking fish at usual and accustomed grounds and stations in common with all citizens of the territory. But as early as 1870, competition between native and non-native fishermen created tensions that would ultimately lead to the 1974 Boldt decision 100 years later. Solana Booth has more.
As canning operations increased, Washington State began cracking down on tribal fishing and even blaming tribes for fish shortages. In the early 1900s, salmon conservation laws were passed, outlawing the use of nets in rivers. Fishermen were called renegades. Tribal members were arrested for exercising their treaty fishing rights. The undercurrent of a fish war was growing.
It wasn't a war. They called it a war, you know. It wasn't a war. It was just, we was trying to prove a point that we had our usual and custom fishing rights. I guess you'd have to call it more racist than it was anything the state of Washington. And then we got in the big squabble out on the Puyallup River.
Think about what the public attitude towards Indians was then. Public regarded Indians as a kind of curiosity, an anachronism. They didn't fit in anywhere. And in general, the feeling was that they were bound to vanish. And that was the prevalent feeling of the official Washington as well as the general public.
Fishing isn't just fishing for economy. Fishing is a way of life for all tribes and all tribal members and fishermen. And I just can't imagine the horror that our grandparents, great-grandparents went through not having the ability to exercise that right.
When I was younger, I used to walk down and watch them gaff fish in Bosco Creek, which is the small tributary of the Elwha, right at the mouth of the Elwha. And they would be gaffing, you know, 10, 20, 30 fish because it had a very good coal run. And we'd be sitting on the bridge, keeping an eye out for the game wardens.
There was Don McLeod, Al Bridges, Herman John, Billy Frank, Nugie Couts, Jack McLeod. There were 6 of them that went to jail, and they went to jail to prove a point. And then the rest of us stood out there and starved while all of our husbands was in jail, and all of our equipment and all of our nets were taken from us. They returned a few, but not enough. That it was beginning to come together that our treaty rights were being abused. And what we had signed up for wasn't being given to us, and that the Bureau of Indian Affairs was closing their eyes to what was happening to Indian people. The publicity that was put out by all these people helped force the United States government to take a stand and stand up for the tribal people.
I viewed U.S. v. Washington as a civil rights case because basically these were federally guaranteed rights that were systematically denied by a state government. What more could you ask for than as a civil rights case? And this was not a fight over property. This was a fight over a way of life. This was a fight over preservation of a culture.
I think it was a major decision that went through the whole United States, and tribes could see that this could be done. For Boldt to stand up and take the stance he had was unbelievable. And he didn't waver, he didn't backtrack. He stood strong in what his decision was.
Judge Boldt just read and read and read. He asked his research assistant to come in and bring him all the books he could find in the law library about Indian law. And so he wrote an opinion that was unlike anything that had been written before in terms of understanding. He recognized them as sovereign nations. He ordered not only that tribes had the right to take the 50%, but that they were regulators, they were governments, and they could regulate. And he urged them to organize and set up regulatory systems.
Indian tribes will always be managers. We have to be managers. There's no other way. We're working 24 hours a day to make something more positive that we can see. But I have hope.
The 1974 Boldt decision made a positive change in Indian country. Tribal fishing rights were guaranteed and treaty rights were validated. For Northwest Indian News, I'm Solana Booth.
Next, we'll continue the story of the Boldt decision and how it is affecting fishing rights today. That story and more on this episode of Northwest Indian News.
Washington's Indian tribes are investing in natural resources.
The main goal of the Tulalip Forestry Program is to preserve over half of our reservation in the forestry classification.
The Tulalips manage their tribal forest lands, create jobs, and also work with the U.S. Forest Service in our national forests.
We have a very unique collaborative effort here with the Tulalip tribes to restore the landscape for future generations.
Tribal stewardship of natural resources across Washington is an investment that benefits everyone.
To my tribe, I'm more than a student. I'm an example that it's possible to get an education.
Education can end poverty, violence, and health issues on the res.
On the reservation, tribal students find ways to turn their education into an entire tribe's education.
Even when only 5% of Indians on the reservation
only 5% of Indians
can afford to go to college.
If I do nothing, 25,000 people will continue to live in poverty.
I will help 2 million people educate themselves.
I'll keep 173,000 people from losing their sacred home.
Hey!
Welcome back to Northwest Indian News. In 1974, the Boldt decision reaffirmed tribes' right to harvest salmon and laid the groundwork for formal co-management of the resource. In the years following, the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission was formed to advance the tribe's role as co-managers. NWIN's Sherry Macy brings us more.
The life cycle of all marine creatures is immersed in Salish culture and traditions. With treaty rights restored, we shift our focus on making positive changes as co-managers and gaining strength to fight for the health of our ecosystem.
You know, the fishing rights is a very powerful story. You know, Judge Boldt, gave us our treaty right back in 1974. And if it wasn't for Judge Boldt, we may not have a lot of the things our Indian communities have. That opened the door for us for our treaty rights, for our fishing, our hunting, and our gathering. But I don't think people realize how big of a deal that Boldt decision in 1974 was for Indian people.
The positive things that tribes have accomplished under the Boldt decision is that we are now co-managers. It means the state cannot implement a process without having tribes involved. And that's a big plus, you know, that we work together.
The future of fish in this state depends on the tribes. And if the tribes weren't here with their treaty right, the legal right that they have, and the passion that they bring to protecting the resource, there wouldn't be any fish in this state. The commission was formed in 1974, immediately following the Boldt decision. It was essentially an outcome of that decision when the tribal leaders recognized that they would be strong with one voice, and that's what they were providing for.
I believe that the tribes can do their best, but you know, it's going to take the other people in the state, you know, the other governments in the state, and their support to preserve what we have and try to bring back some of what we had in the past to get it done.
Fisheries management is an ongoing issue, and so it's never settled. You're only as good as the latest management decision. And of course, the salmon are going out to the ocean. Maybe they'll survive well, maybe they won't. So it's always a matter of adaptive management.
We have processes north of Falcon where we sit down and we say who's going to fish, where they're going to fish, and how much they fish. Alaska, Canada, United States, we go to clear to California. We more or less do that on the shellfish program. Working together, we have an allocation, state has an allocation, you don't overfish. Water quality, you take specimens and you make sure the water's in good shape.
That's all life, you know, and life to our ecosystem is so important. People don't understand what life is all about. You know, you walk down on the beach now and you see life. You see them spurt, the clams spurting. You see the gooey ducks. You see all of our shellfish happening right in front of your eyes. And we have to sustain our shellfish and our salmon and our clean water and our quantity and quality of water.
I think that's why Billy worked so hard, you know, and traveled so much and met with people, and he was a good diplomat, so we are learning to be diplomats and moving forward in a positive direction, mostly to make sure there will be fish for the future. And it's scary because of the pollution and culvert cases, shoreline management. There's a whole lot of things out there that are impacting your salmon. And like we say, tribal people, the past, the present, and the future. We want to be able to always do the things we've done hundreds of years ago. We want to continue to do those things. And a big part of that in our ceremonies and our subsistence relies on the resources.
Without habitat, there's no fish. And without fish, there's no treaty right. We all must take part in promoting and protecting the health of our sacred waters. For Northwest Indian News, I'm Sherry Macy.
Visit NWIN.TV, where you can view every episode of Northwest Indian News on demand.
He had the ability to be down on the riverbank talking to fishermen one moment, and the next moment he would be in the White House talking to the president.
You can also watch NWIN and other Native programming at TulalipTV.com. Coming up next, an annual celebration honors the legacy of Billy Frank Jr.
You know, I can remember coming here and listening to him speak when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. So, you know, this was kind of his baby. My dad did a lot of work for not just Indian people, but everybody in general.
If I stay on the res, I'll be 8 times less likely to drop out of college.
If I stay on the res,
I won't be just another number.
I can learn biology in my native language.
If I stay on the res,
I will learn about the old ways so my culture will live on.
If I stay on the res,
I will make my parents proud.
I'll make my people proud.
Our history will not be forgotten.
If I stay on the res.
If I stay on the res.
Learn more about the tribal colleges and how they're helping Native American people. The American Indian College Fund, educating the mind and spirit.
The suicide rate of Native Americans is 25% higher than the national rate.
Today is just another day.
The day I think about you.
The day I remember your laugh.
The day I remember your sense of humor.
Why were you so sad?
What made you hurt so much?
Why didn't you call?
Why didn't I see your signs?
Your pain may be gone.
But mine just started.
No one said life was easy.
There is help. There's hope.
Reach out to someone.
Reach out to me.
Reach out to me.
Reach out to me.
A person commits suicide every 40 seconds.
So please get help. It's worth it. Be strong and live life.
Welcome back to Northwest Indian News. Recently, the annual Salmon Homecoming celebration was held at the Seattle waterfront. This year's event was dedicated to Billy Frank Jr. and honored his legacy. Leandro Smith was there and brings us the story.
The Seattle waterfront came alive with the sound of drums, dancing, and songs as visitors joined area tribes to celebrate this year's Salmon Homecoming. This three-day event is a chance for the community to learn about salmon, habitat protection, and the importance of salmon to native culture.
We ask that you come ashore and share a song and dance and a meal with us. Thank you very much for being here today.
The native tribes of Puget Sound, they were stewards long before this area was settled. Salmon was a primary food source. They watched the salmon, how they behaved. They acknowledged the seasons of the salmon, and they've always honored them and respected them in a way because that was sustenance to their very lives.
Many tribes have their own version of Salmon Homecoming. It's when the salmon come back into the region, and we have a great harvest, so we have a big celebration when that happens because it meant survival.
This year's Salmon Homecoming was dedicated to the life and memory of Billy Frank Jr., who worked tirelessly throughout his life fighting for salmon and the environment. Billy Frank Jr. was instrumental in organizing the first Salmon Homecoming 22 years ago and was a supporter and advisor throughout the history of the celebration.
Because he loved this celebration and wanting to teach all of the people about the importance of salmon, not only to us Indian people, but to all people. Even if you don't eat salmon, you need clean water, you need clean environment, and that's what he was all about.
I can remember coming here and listening to him speak when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. So, this was kind of his baby. My dad did a lot of work for not just Indian people, but everybody in general. He cared about our natural resource, he cared about our treaty right, he cared about our sovereignty. He devoted his whole life to protecting the salmon. It started at a young age for him. First time he got arrested, he was 14 for fishing on the Nisqually River. For fishing. This was our way of life. And he was going to jail over and over and over again for it.
He led by example. It's all of us that can carry Billy's legacy on to the future in so many small ways that make big differences.
Billy not only was a great advocate for salmon, he was a good teacher. He was a great leader. He inspired a lot of people. A good leader shares his knowledge. And when Billy would talk with people, he would share his knowledge with them and encourage you to keep moving along.
As we've seen today with all the school kids coming through here, that was one of Billy's messages that all of us are trying to carry on, teaching the young ones, because they're our future. They're our leaders, they're our governors, our senators that are going to come through. And once they have that better understanding of the resources that we're all responsible for, we know we're going to have a better world.
We have students with 4th and 5th grade that come in every year, and they go through environmental booths and learn all about the salmon. My heart is with those children and teaching them about who we are and who they are.
It's really inspiring to hear these young kids talk about the environment than the knowledge they have about environmental protection. We need to perpetuate this effort. We need to perpetuate this celebration of life, not only for the salmon, but for the people.
You know, my dad loved coming up here. You know, whether he wasn't feeling 100%, he would still come up here and do whatever they asked, talk to the kids. I mean, he loved talking to the kids. He had so much energy and passion for protecting our salmon and protecting our treaty rights. And I mean, he, at 80 years old, he's still out there with my brother and I fishing on the Nisqually River. Not because he has to, you know, it's just because that's what he's 80 years old and he's still pulling the net in. We're like, Dad, no, you need to just relax. And here he's pulling the net and getting wet, getting slimy, you know. And so, I mean, you know, nobody can fill his shoes. You know, what he stood for and what he went through in his lifetime. Not you or me or anybody else. None of these tribal leaders can experience what he went through. I think it's going to take everybody working together, you know, and doing their own part. You know, he paved the way for everybody, you know, and it's our job to keep it going now and continue his legacy.
For more information about this fantastic family event, visit salmonhomecoming.org. For Northwest Indian News, this is Leandra Smith reporting.
I'm Carissa Peapud-Gobin, and I hope you've enjoyed the stories we've brought to you today. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time on Northwest Indian News.